Hello, and welcome to Zap the Gender Pay Gap, the podcast series where we expose the elephant in the room. The elephant's name, the gender pay gap. I am coming to you from Memphis, Tennessee, located on the banks of the mighty Mississippi River. Nestled in the southwest corner of the state, Memphis is home to the blues, barbecue, and so much more. I am your host, Gwendolyn Tucker.
Thank you so very much for joining me for this episode of Zap the Gender Pay Gap. I am your host, Gwendolyn Tucker. Look for me on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and other platforms where you find your favorite podcast. I would love to be one of your favorites. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. I'd greatly appreciate that too. Payscale's Gender Pay Gap report is hot off the press. And on the past two episodes, I have been sharing some of those findings with you. Most of it was old news in that it was a repeat of stats and facts that I had heard before. In a nutshell, it confirms that women continue to be underpaid compared to their male counterparts. There were a few new revelations, some that I found surprising, some I found appalling. Those I will share with you today. Now, I launched this podcast for three reasons. One, to expose this elephant in the room I've named the gender pay gap. Two, to disclose some previously unknown information, some pertinent facts about the impact this elephant is making on a woman's pay. And three, to identify ways to dispose of this elephant as well as its effects. And I do that by helping women find and fix their gender pay gap. And I do it with every woman who will listen and who has the courage to act. Now, since Payscale went to all the trouble to conduct this report, I find it only fitting that I share some findings from the report. I also realize that just because the report has been published, some women, should I say most women, are probably not aware of the findings. I do not want you to be ignorant, nor do I want you to be misinformed. So I have taken it upon myself to get this information onto your radar and onto the radar of as many women and decision makers as possible. So here goes. Unfortunately, the report confirms that women continue to be underpaid compared to their male counterparts. There has been little movement or improvement in closing the gap. And guess what? According to Payscale, the gender pay gap is not due to a lack of education. Now, that was surprising, but before going there, let me do a refresh. To give you an overview, here are the general findings from the Gender Pay Gap report that was released by Payscale. One, the gap between what women and men are paid persists year over year, indicating that the reasons for the gender pay gap are systemic. Since Payscale started tracking the gender pay gap, the difference between the earnings of women and men has shrunk, but only by an infinitesimal amount each year. In 2023, the gender pay gap didn't shrink at all. Number two, the uncontrolled gender pay gap tells us that the distribution of high earning, prestigious jobs in society favors men, while the presence of the controlled gender pay gap tells us that at least some women are being paid less than men. They are still being paid less than men when doing the same jobs. Number three, the gender pay gap persists even when men and women have the same education. Number four, it is wider for women who are parents and for women who work from home. Five, the gender pay gap also widens as women age and progress in their careers. Six, it is wider for women in certain occupations and industries as well, and some states and metro areas. Now, number seven is a little bit of good news. The gender pay gap has narrowed slightly for women of color. Most of the findings were old news, as I said, in that it was a repeat of stats and facts that I had heard before. But there were some new revelations that I found both surprising and disturbing. One new revelation was the extent to which moms are impacted by what is called the motherhood penalty. It's defined as the phenomenon by which a woman's income decreases after she becomes a mom. I talked about this fact at length in my previous episode. To hear more, please check it out. Remember what I said about the revelation that the gender pay gap is not due to a lack of education? Now that set me back on my heels a bit. And that is why today I want to devote the balance of our time together to discuss it, especially what the survey revealed about MBAs and pay. If you recall, Payscale reports findings based on what is called the uncontrolled and controlled gender pay gap. It analyzes both a number of ways, including by parent status, remote work status, education, age, race, and location, occupation, as well as the top jobs where the gender pay gap is widest. And that's the case, even when all pay factors are controlled. Payscale reports that higher education does not lead to pay equity for women. The gender pay gap sees minimal or no improvement at higher educational attainment levels compared to a high school degree. While associate, bachelor's, and master's degrees close the gender pay gap slightly, MBAs, law degrees, and doctorates see a wider controlled pay gap. The widest uncontrolled pay gap is for those with MBAs, and this has persisted year over year. Women with MBAs take home 76 cents for every dollar that men with MBAs take home. This may indicative of women struggling to get jobs requiring and compensating for an MBA compared to men. The widest uncontrolled gap is for those with MBAs, which has persisted year over year. Women with MBAs take home less than men with MBAs. Now, that's what the data said. But what does it mean? It means that women with more education generally earn more than women who do not have education. But women with higher education don't generally earn what their male counterparts earn who have the same educational attainment. Their male counterparts tend to earn more. Now, am I advocating for lower education or for not getting more education? Absolutely not. Growing up, it was drummed into me that education was the way to go. It was understood that I would go to college because it was the gateway to a good job. And it was. I graduated college with a degree in accounting, which afforded me the opportunity to get a good job at St. Regis Paper Company. After starting my career, I sat for and passed the CPA exam. Becoming a certified public accountant put me in the running for a management position within our internal audit department within Champion Paper Company. And it has helped me get indoors that I otherwise would have been barred from entering. But you can imagine my shock to read that the gender pay gap is not due to a lack of education. But the data supports that. Now, needless to say, I was shocked by some of the findings from Payscale's latest report on the gender pay gap. But you know what is more shocking? What is more shocking is that a lot of women are trapped in the gender pay gap and they don't even know it. So I am asking for your help. How? By getting the word out. One way is by sharing this podcast with women and the people who love them. Will you help me do that? If so, I greatly appreciate it. Maybe your eyes have been opened and you are ready to take steps to close your gender pay gap. If that describes you, I'd be happy to assist you with that. To set up a call to find out how I can show you how to close your pay gap and determine if we are a good fit, message me. Go to gwendolynjtucker.com and click on contact. A link is in the description box below. You can reach out to me there. Women, you work hard for your money. I can show you how to take home all of it. Thank you so very much for joining me for this episode of my podcast. If you like what you hear here, please invite a woman in your world to listen into. If you missed the previous episode, please take a listen. Look for me on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and other platforms where you find your favorite podcasts. I would love to be one of your favorites. I look forward to seeing you here next Wednesday at noon Central Standard Time for the next episode of Zap the Gender Pay Gap. Until then, please be well.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Zap the Gender Pay Gap. Please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow me wherever you get your favorite podcast. I am your host, Gwendolyn Tucker. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.